this computer. Oh, okay. So thank you for taking the time out to speak with me on today. It really means a ton. I hope that this research can truly bridge the gap in understanding a few dynamics. So essentially what we'll start with is there sort of three parts to the questionnaire, to the interview. We'll start with the first, which is more logistical questions, if you will. So I'll start with the first question, which is, what corporate function do you work in, or what type of work do you do?
I do business management within HR. So I work specifically with corporate services. So corporate security, real estate, and travel.
Awesome. Okay. And if you can remember, what are some of the reasons that initially attracted you to your organization?
Well, it's been a few years. I actually started as a contingent worker. I went through an agency to try to find something. I had just moved and I wanted to find a company in Denver. And I didn't know a ton about the city. So I went through an agency, found a job, long-term temping. I was signed on for about 8 months with TIAA, and I loved it once I was there.
Okay.
The culture really felt like they cared about their employees. I wasn't completely aware of the benefits, but I knew that they were something particularly good with the company because people talked about it constantly. So part of it was definitely having worked there. I knew that it felt pretty good. That being said, the department I was in was a completely horrible fit for me. So after my 8 months was up, I started looking for jobs elsewhere, as well as within TIAA. And the job I found was with the department that I'm still with now.
Got it. Okay. So essentially the reputation of the company preceded it. So that is essentially, what attracted you. You got in and sort of found your niche, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Are you aware of any diversity and inclusion initiatives at your current place of work?
Yes, there are tons.
If you could just speak on some, or
just a handful. Yeah. So we are really big on, we have a bunch of BRGs, so business resource groups. We have ones for Asian Americans, Black and Caribbean Americans. We have ones based on professionalism. So like young professionals, senior professionals. There's a female BRG, or female-centered BRG. There's an LGBTQIA BRG. So those do a lot of our work. In addition to that, we do a lot of, I guess, events around things like culture months. We just did a race against racism last weekend. We do that in June every year. It's only been a couple of years now that they've been doing that, particularly with everything with George Floyd last year, kind of fell in, but we've always done things like recognizing Juneteenth. So it kind of fell in that month.
Got it. Okay.
Really well. But yeah, it's kind of just interwoven. With everything that happened last year, we had a lot of corporate communications talking about, where we stood with everything. It always just feels extremely inclusive. When the Asian American issues started coming up, I mean, I know it was all last year, but when we really started to feel it earlier this year, there were a lot of communications regarding it. So it's just kind of an everyday as events come up piece.
Got it. Okay.
We also have the distinction of having the first Black CEO in Fortune 500 ever. And our current CEO, Tashunda, is, I want to say there's only 2 or 3 right now Black female CEOs in the Fortune 500. And I think there's only been 4 or 5 ever.
Oh, wow.
So not that that's necessarily a criteria for being in leadership here, but it definitely has a different feel when we can see it.
Yes, certainly. Okay. No, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So what does inclusion mean to you?
Gosh. I think it just means I don't have to think about if I'm going to be judged based on being female. I don't have to judge based on the fact that I'm a mother. I don't have to be judged on the fact that I'm white. There really feels like, I feel like for me, generationally, we're moving so much further into that space of it's just the person.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's still so much work being done,
Yeah.
but I feel like being able to just have my resume be my resume versus having to worry about, am I going to be excluded from something because I'm XYZ?
Okay. Love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, and the last question of this segment is, do you feel included or that you belong at your current employer?
I do. Very much so.
All right. All right. So now we'll talk a bit about organizational assimilation. Are you familiar with what that is or?
Not
Okay.
really.
A little bit of background. So, organizational assimilation is essentially the introduction to the organization from the organization to the new employee, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
So it's that moment where the organization is introducing cultural norms, setting expectations, and vice versa, right? So it's a partnership, it's a relationship, if you will. They're also understanding your expectations and your norms, what you share your affinities with, if you will. And so it's assimilating you with the organization as a new employee. Um,
Okay.
so just based off of that, what does that mean to you and just your the impacts your organization may have had on you?
Sure. So TIAA in particular is very mission driven. We have a set of values. I like to tell new hires oftentimes every company will say they have their values, they'll put it up on a board. Sometimes they live them, sometimes they don't. TIA really does. So a lot of the assimilation piece for me was listening to other employees saying things like, well, how's that going to impact our customers?
Mhm.
Um, you know, how is this living our values? It comes up a lot. And I feel like that's probably the biggest piece with getting comfortable with the company. It we have mandatory trainings, we have ethics trainings, we have all those things. But I think it's much more watching the actions of others and why they're doing the actions that they do. They're very clear about it in many, many cases. So I think that's probably the biggest thing to becoming a part of the company and really understanding the underlying, it's almost like an energy
Yeah.
within the company.
Okay.
That's not to say that we don't have moments where we are clearly not acting out that culture, but it's expected.
Got it. Okay. So definitely intentional is what I'm hearing.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
Um,
And we
okay.
have a lot of people who have worked with us for 20, 30 years. So for them, it's almost like a second religion. It's just their how they operate all the time.
Got it. Okay. And so if you, and I know, it may have been a while before and maybe a little bit hard to think about, but if you could think about your first 90 days, I know you mentioned like
Mhm.
trainings. Do you remember like, and I know it may look a little different because you started as a sort of contingency worker, as you
Yeah.
mentioned. But I guess maybe even your first 90 days as a full-time employee.
Mhm.
Do you remember like what that looked like?
Yeah. The first probably week was very HR heavy. So we did a lot of things around general trainings, history of the company. What are our missions and values? What are we who are our customers is a really big thing because we work a lot in the nonprofit space. There's a lot of emphasis on the fact that we are generally working for people who aren't the wealthiest individuals in the country, but they provide a wealth of information to others.
Yeah.
So there's a lot with that. Otherwise, moving into my actual job was probably a lot easier than I expected. I moved into an analytics space. I'd worked with analytics before. A lot of it was just talking with people to understand what our group did. We had some formal training, but a lot of things were just looking over people's shoulders and learning that way. That's how I learned best as well. So I don't know if that experience would have been different had I expressed that I learn better if I'm reading something or watching a video.
Got it.
And then I joined a business resource group for young professionals really early on, probably only a month in. So a lot of my introduction to the company as a whole, not my department, really came through that. So going to networking events, social events. We had a couple of speakers within that time frame that I would have gone to see. So that was pretty formative.
Okay, cool. No, that's great. And that was a business resource group you mentioned?
Yes.
Okay.
I think at the time they were called employee resource groups. We've moved names a couple of times.
Got it. Okay. Got it. All right. And you talked a little bit about your organization's core values. Do you identify with any of your organization's core values?
Putting our customer first is really one that I love. The rest of them all identify on different days.
Okay.
We have act with integrity, I feel like should just go without saying. We've operated as one team. Some days we are better at that than others. So it just kind of depends on the day. And even, there are days when I go to tell somebody like, oh yeah, we've got 6 values. I need to list them right here. And I still have to kind of think because they've been so ingrained. It's kind of hard to remember my verbiage on it, but yeah, putting the customer first is definitely a big one. And I think one of the things that really differentiates us is because we own our retirement plan. I'm an employee, but I'm also a customer.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So is every full-time employee. So frequently when we talk about stewardship a lot.
Okay.
Part of it is because it's also my retirement fund. Yeah. So it's very easy to be connected to that customer when it's me.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good. I like that actually. Okay. And then just thinking about your assimilation, do you feel that you were assimilated similar to your peers as a woman, as a white woman, as a mother? Like, do you feel that you were assimilated similar to your peers?
I was not a mother at the time.
Okay.
So that one, I mean, watching others, I feel like it's pretty much the same. But yeah, I never really noticed anything different.
Okay.
The only thing I remember being a little bit different, it wasn't necessarily with the assimilation, but I'm a millennial.
Yeah.
I like to think I'm a pretty typical millennial. I, went to college, got a job, paid off my student loans. Like I feel pretty standard. But that stigma of the stereotypical millennial kind of comes along with it. So I often got questions about millennial things, which in my mind just aren't really a thing. But with that exception, it never felt like age discrimination. It was almost more age curiosity.
I like that. Okay.
I'm going to move along with you for a second. I'm about to run out of battery.
Oh, okay.
You walk through my house with me. But yeah, from a female perspective, and I will say, I'm sure there's more questions about it later, but when I did have my kids, like coming back from leave, everything was supportive. There was never, I feel very fortunate with that. I never felt anything other than support, with the exception of maybe over support of being told, if you need anything extra, just let me know. And I really wanted to just get back to normal. So
yeah. Okay. No, that's great. Okay, so we've completed the first two segments. Now we'll begin in the last sort of portion of this, and is on job satisfaction. And so definitely we'll dive a little bit into those things. So, are you currently satisfied with your current employer? Why or why not?
Yes. Yes. I recently switched positions a little bit within my department. Um, so I'm in a growth phase right now. It's the first time I'm managing people, which is very exciting to me. I've been able to grow whenever it's been time for me to grow. When those conversations have come up and I've been able to say, I'm starting to feel like I'm getting stagnant, there's always been something new. That being said, this is probably my last position within this department. So I'm starting to look more at 5 years from now, if I want to stay with this employer, what does my life look like? Because it's probably not within this group. I'm hitting a point where the next level is not necessarily one that I would want. So where do I go next? But I plan on being here long term. So I think that's probably my major indicator.
Okay. No, that's awesome. Okay. So we talked about it a little bit. However, if you could give your top three reasons for why you are satisfied, that would be great. So I know you mentioned growth. That seems
Growth is, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think the company is getting more intentional with that. I know when I first started, there was some concern about growth, not necessarily. We just didn't always have options for people because people stay for a really long time. So if people are working here for 25 years, they max out at their job. If they don't leave, nobody's there to take that job, to have somebody below them take their job. It just kind of works out that way. It's felt in the last few years like that's starting to move a little bit more. So that's huge. I love my team. I love my manager. I love the people that she works for. I feel very respected by them. Generally, if I say something, they listen. And if they say no, I'm usually given a reason. So that's very helpful to me. And then I do feel a sense of loyalty in general, just because they've taken care of me through 2 pregnancies and having kids. And because I've been able to grow in my position, I do feel just a general loyalty to the company that I don't know if that would be there as much at other companies that I've worked with.
Got it. Got it. And do you feel so with this loyalty, do you feel like it was felt really through your team or through the organization? Or like how, if you could just
It's
talk
both.
both?
It's probably my team more than the overall organization, but the overall organization made that possible.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And so are you involved in any activities at your current employer, but that may not be within your current workspace? So, any champions groups, any ambassador, anythings, or volunteer, anything that definitely affects your work, but not necessarily your job description, if you will.
I just moved off of a leadership position with our young professionals group. So currently, no, I'd like to get back into that. Once we're back in the office, I feel like that's going to be a little easier to organically figure out. But I spent 4.5 years in leadership positions in a couple of different spaces. I ran our Denver chapter of that particular BRG for a couple of years. And then I did professional development. I was basically a professional development champion for that group for another 2 years. I'm still a member. I still go to events, but I've taken a step back from the leadership piece.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. And then are you aware of any mentorship opportunities available at your place of work?
Mhm. So I am a big proponent of non-forced mentorship.
Yeah.
Shouldn't say forced, non-organized mentorship. That being said, we do have organized mentorship programs within different departments. So I've done two that were organized. Both when our department is now in HR, but it used to be within our corporate CFO function. They had one in particular. I am not certain if HR has one or not. We're still pretty new to the group. But that's there. Our BRGs host an intern mentorship program every summer. So I had an intern last summer. I told him to participate at all costs because he got to talk to somebody outside of our department, which was wonderful. And then we do have, again, within some of our BRGs, we have job shadowing programs. So they're not necessarily a long-term mentorship. The two that I participated in the past that were formal were for about 6 months. So those were definitely longer. One of those people I'm still in contact with, one of them I'm not. It's just personality wise, one worked out better than the other.
Got it. And were you mentored at all?
I was the mentee in both of those scenarios.
Mentee in both of those. Okay.
Mhm.
Awesome. Okay.
But like I said, I also have probably 3 different people that I would consider unofficial mentors. I don't think we've ever used the word, but that is what they are. There's
Essentially, yeah.
very little question on it. We just don't say it.
Yeah. Or it hasn't went through the ranks of the
Yeah.
yeah, got it. Okay. And so we're in on our last question. It is sort of like a 3-part question, but it is our last one. What are your professional slash personal goals? Like, what are your goals as you stand now?
So I don't know a particular department that I'm looking for, but I really want to enact change at a higher level than what I'm doing now. So a lot of that does come with just generally being promoted. But I am really excited to start managing others because I feel like you can really enact more change when you have a team that you are overseeing. So I am crossing my fingers that I'm actually able to enact some change with them. I'm still very much new and learning, but I, part of it is just wanting to move to that next level to get that personal satisfaction out of knowing that I could do it. I'm an achiever by nature. It, being able to grab on that next rung is always something that I'm excited about. That being said, I am a wife and a mom. So I also want to make sure that my family is a priority. So whereas I feel like 10 years ago, before they showed up, my goals were much more about doing whatever I needed to at work to move ahead. I appreciate the fact that I might move a little bit slower, but I can come home at 4:30 if I need to. So there's definitely a balance to it. My husband and I are very equal partners in everything. I'm fortunate enough to have somebody who wants to be an equal partner in things. But that does mean that I don't move cities without talking to him about it first. And that is something that can be an issue depending on where I want to move next. So,
Got it.
Yeah, they're so intertwined.
Yeah, they are. They are. Okay. And so, do you feel supported by your organization um, as it relates to your goals?
Yes.
Yes. And if
Yes.
you could,
I
why or how?
I can say easily the personal goals, we really do emphasize having a flexible arrangement for most of our employees. Now, if you're a security guard, you're kind of stuck working your shift. There's not a whole lot of flexibility there. You're physically, yeah. But particularly after COVID, we're moving into a flexible workspace. We can be home or be in the office, which is huge for me. I have never felt like if I had to leave to go to a doctor's appointment, that there was any sort of, oh, well, we're keeping track of how many hours you're out because of the thought is always that as long as my work is getting done, everything is fine. So that personally allows for me to do a lot more. Professionally, I feel like I've always been able to ask when I wanted something new and been told whether or not it feels appropriate. I came back from both of my maternity leaves realizing that the current job I was doing was not quite the right fit anymore, because I had already kind of moved into a new role without doing it technically. And I've been able to have those conversations with my manager and say, hey, I feel like it's time for either a promotion or a move. Something has to switch here. Mm-hmm. And in both of those cases, that happened. It took a little bit of time, but we were able to work things out. I've had other times where I've said, I think it might be time for me to move into a different position. And I've been told, yeah, it might be, but you could also try these 4 different things within your position to expand it a little bit. So I've been proactive about it, mm-hmm. but at the same time, in one of the cases where I was promoted, I went to my manager to talk about it and things were already in the works. I just didn't know about it. So they're very aware of it. And as far as movement within the company outside of my space goes, I feel like we're just happy to have people who are happy to be here and do the work. So anytime I've brought up, hey, there's an opportunity in a different department, I'm thinking about applying for it to my manager, she's been supportive of it. She's said, if this is where you want to go, let me know. I can help if I can. Mm-hmm. But if it's not something that you are super interested in, let's talk about why you want to be moving. Is there something we could be doing here? Or is it just that feels like a really great fit? So I've been very, very lucky with that.
Awesome. And so then, given all of that, do you feel that you're making progress to your goals?
I do. It's a little slower than I anticipated, but I'm choosing that.
Yeah.
I think that's a big difference from my first job out of college, where everything was just how fast can I move? Mm-hmm. I feel like now so much is how fast can I move reasonably to keep my sanity, keep my life. I like to be able to do things outside of my job, and I can't do that if I'm at work truly all day. So I feel like I've been able to change my goals, and the company's been able to change along with me, which is huge.
Awesome. I like that. Change with me. Okay. Cool. Well, unless you have anything else you'd like to add on, how well or what your organization is doing to retain women. I certainly, I mean, you've given a wealth, but unless you have anything more, we certainly have come to the end of our interview. Not sure if you have anything you want to add or.
The only thing I will say, and I'm sure you would hear this from just about anyone, I was fortunate enough to have adequate maternity leave. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, we provide adequate paternity leave. It's just parental leave. It doesn't matter if you adopt a child, if you're a father, if you're a mother, if you are a non-birth parent. So if you're a gay couple and you've decided to adopt or go through surrogacy, or a lesbian couple and your partner had a child, no matter what, even if you're fostering, you get 3.5 months, it's 16 weeks. So depending on where your months fall, you get that time. having had a husband who took 2 weeks of PTO and went back to work after both kids, the fact that it's not just for the moms actually makes me feel more supported as a mom. It puts that emphasis on the fact that your entire family goes through those changes. And if you don't support non-birth parents, it can mess up so many different things, particularly I feel like for moms. My second child was much easier because my husband was working from home due to COVID.
Yeah.
But with my first, it was very difficult to be alone for 3 months.
Yes. Yes.
So while I was lucky and had people come in from out of town to help, not everyone has that. And I feel like that support is something that we always talk about maternity leave. I don't think we talk as much about non-birth parent parental leave. And I think that's huge.
That is, yeah.
And it makes me proud to work here that they care enough to do that. I think that's getting more popular.
Yeah.
But
I was going to ask, I mean, has it been around your tenure of working with your organization, or is that a newer benefit, or?
Both. So when I got really lucky, I was pregnant when we switched the policy. So it was birth parents got 10 weeks, which was still very generous compared to most companies. Completely paid, totally like you were just working there, but not there for 10 weeks. At the time, it was 4 weeks for non-birth parents. So it was still something.
Yeah.
I still think it was wonderful that they even provided that. But while I was pregnant, they made that change. And that change actually came out of an initiative. Our LGBTQIA group was saying, we're noticing that a lot of people are, or a lot of other companies are starting to expand their benefits to non-birth parents. And they were saying, if you are a same-sex couple and one of you gives birth, but the other one still wants to be there, it's difficult because you aren't a birth parent. So you get that 4 weeks and that's lovely, but you might actually be the one who wanted to be the primary caretaker for that first few months. So they started doing research about what some of our other competitors were doing, and slowly but surely, they all seem to be moving to the same longer term, whatever the case is, whoever you are, version of parental leave.
Yeah.
So I luckily was in the first couple of months of that happening. I was probably in the first 10 people who went on leave with it. So there's, as long as I've been here, there's been some form of a benefit.
Yeah.
But that expanded benefit, my daughter's 3.5, so probably 4 years ago was when that came into play.
Okay. No, that's huge. That's huge.
It's a massive difference.
It is.
Yeah. Not feeling pressured to come back. When I did come back, I was given a lot of, again, flexibility. If you need to be home a little bit more, or if schedules get funky, feel free to try to find a way to flex. I just never felt like it was a negative that I left for the 3 months. People were very glad to have me back.
Yeah.
So I probably felt more appreciated than ever. But yeah, I do really feel like the non-birth parent leave is a massive thing that gets overlooked.
Certainly. No, that's huge, actually, especially given the times, right? So, no, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that wraps us up.
Great.
Again, just thank you for your participation. I truly appreciate it.